The Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NELFUND, has disbursed over 84 billion naira to support students since the launch of its loan program, according to Boyega Isika, House Committee Chairman on Polytechnic and Higher Technical Education. As of September 2024, more than 350,000 students have registered on the NELFUND portal, with 258,000 applying for loans. The program, aimed at bridging the financial gap in higher education, offers loans for tuition and maintenance allowances. The recent Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act has eliminated barriers such as income thresholds and guarantor requirements, making loans accessible to more students. Funds provided cover institutional fees and monthly upkeep of 20,000 naira per student, with repayment starting 2 years after National Youth Service Corps. The implementation of the fund has raised concerns among Nigerians, including graduates' ability to repay loans in a tough job market, limited awareness of the program in rural areas, and complexities in the application process. To speak to these concerns and more, we have the Managing Director of NELFUND, Akintunde Sawyerr. Good morning, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me here this morning.
Perfect.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, as you heard in my introduction there, the major concern is the fact that I believe unemployment rate has even gone higher in Q4 of 2023 to about 5.0%. What is the guarantee that, our young graduates will be able to repay these loans, given the unemployment rate 2 years after their National Youth Service Corps?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very valid question, but let me just address a number of errors in the initial introduction. So to date, we have disbursed just under 11 billion naira.
Okay.
We have committed to 92 billion, so we're yet to disburse the rest of that. But going back to your question about the job market, I think we need to view this through the lens that this program is a long-term program that is designed to go well into the future. So whilst we may have serious economic challenges today, that may not be the case in the future. And part of this is to address that, because if we educate our people, it will certainly lead to greater job creation, to greater entrepreneurship, greater starting of new companies by some of these people who otherwise may not have had the opportunity or the knowledge or capacity to do this.
Well, I don't think you've answered my question. I know that you're talking about the fact of, long-term programming. I mean, we are in a dire situation. I believe the World Bank actually only last week said that, it will take about 15 years for Nigeria to bounce back if we continue on the reforms that have been implemented. What measures are there for students that are not able to repay these loans? What are the measures that you guys have put in place after 2 years of the new
So I hope I'll be able to answer your question now. So the provision within the law for this says that students don't have to repay until 2 years after their NYSC.
Correct.
Now, going beyond that, the obligation for repayment is on the employer. So the students themselves don't have to physically go and make repayments to the NELFUND. It is the employer that employs them that makes a deduction and pays the NELFUND against the salary or the wages that they might be earning at the time. Now, if, for example, a student who has a loan goes on and gets a job, say 2 years after NYSC, the employer makes the payments to us. If they lose that job, they stop paying. So actually, this scheme is not designed to sort of tie the obligor down. It's really more about the employer, except in one case where if the student or the obligor becomes self-employed, then of course there is an expectation that they will make those deductions and pay back to the NELFUND. But I don't imagine that will be the case. The majority of people will find themselves in. I think most people will be employed and the deductions will come from the employer, not the obligor.
All right, Mr. Sawyerr, is there a caveat to the repayment plans as you have elsewhere? That if you haven't gotten a job or a job that is at a particular salary threshold, you are not expected to pay. So what if any of your beneficiaries do not have a job until by 3, 4, 5 years, or they have a job that is at just minimum wage level, how are they expected to pay back?
Thank you for that question. I think if people don't have a job, and we don't pray for this, if people don't have a job 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, they're not expected to pay. There are no thresholds. In fact, the way that this works is that there are percentage deductions, 10% to be precise, from whatever salary a person is earning. So there's no tenor to this. There's no time by which the loan must be fully repaid. It is basically you pay when you earn, and it's a 10% deduction by the employer back to the fund.
Thank you very much. So you corrected earlier, you said it's just under 11 billion. Is it still around 200, over 200,000 students that have been able to benefit from the loan so far? Okay,
so a further correction, and yes, thank you for raising that. 90,000 students, 90,000 have actually been disbursed funds. Okay. So it isn't 200,000. However, just to give you some broad numbers, we have committed, as I said, to 92 billion. In terms of funds, 62 billion of that is to upkeep, to pocket money, if you like, and 30 billion is to institutional charges, of which we've disbursed 10 billion so far.
Yeah, and there are about 1.5 million students right now in tertiary institutions that are state-owned or federal-owned in Nigeria.
That's a good ballpark figure, yes.
Ballpark, okay. Yeah. So, you know, when you're looking to these loans, I feel there's been a lot of misinformation about the loans on social media, so that's why I'm trying to couch my questions very carefully, because there's no interest for the loans. And you said that now that the loan money is coming out of the employer, but also the loan doesn't go directly to the students, right? It goes to the university. So can you explain a little bit of how the loan functions?
Okay, great. So it's not just universities. Let me start with that. It's tertiary education, so it's universities, it's polytechnics, it's colleges of education, as long as they're federal or state government owned. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the loans don't just go directly to the institutions. The loans follow two parallel tracks. When students apply for these loans, there are two loans they apply for. The first is their institutional loan. This is the loan that covers the entirety, 100% of their obligation to the institution to be able to attend classes, seminars, tutorials, effectively gives them free access to courses in the institution. They apply for that loan, NELFUND pays it if it's approved, and they take that off the table. There's a second line which is contingent on them applying for the first loan and receiving it. That second line is for them to receive or apply for pocket money, if you like, stipends, which we pay monthly at a rate of 20,000 a month, which you were quite correct about. So there are two loans. In terms of repayment, again, going back to that, the obligation is on the employer, who has an obligation to check to see whether or not the individual has actually got a loan with us, and if they do, then they pay us directly on behalf of the student or the obligor.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that sounds, you know, doable, hopefully. But I believe that there's limited awareness to these programs in, you know, rural areas. What sort of sensitization programs have you guys put in place? And also, like you heard in my introduction, complexities in the application process. Can you, you know, bring us up to speed as to what you guys are doing in terms of sensitization and the application process? Walk us through that as well.
Okay, so thank you. What we've done with sensitization is that we have gone around the country. We've been to 5 geopolitical zones so far. I think the only zone we haven't been to is the Northeast, and we have plans to go to the Northeast. But we've been to 5 geopolitical zones, personally led by me. We've touched very directly 25,800 students in these institutions that we've visited. So our sensitization program is ongoing. We're going personally, we're working through social media, we're working through print media, through electronic media, as I'm doing now. You know, sensitization is an ongoing process. It's normal that the rural areas would be the ones who would be last to hear it because they're less connected. However, we are not going to leave any stone unturned to ensure that all Nigerians become aware of this so that there is an equal opportunities process in play. We're not forcing people to take loans. We're not obliging people to come and apply for this. But we are saying you must be aware of it. And we've been going about 150 days. We're going to get to every nook and cranny of this country. To your second question about complexities in trying to apply for the loan. I must spell certain things out to you. We have decided, we made a decision that we're not going to allow any human interface in the process because we don't want graft. We don't want people being put in a situation where they're having to pay for the opportunity. So the obligation on us to the people who want or need this loan is to make it simple and easy. We're using an electronic process. We're using specific types of identifiers that make it unique to the individual, JAM numbers, NIN, BVN, matriculation numbers, you know, so that the individual can go online, provide us with that information, we match it with what the institution has given us, and we know that we're dealing uniquely with an individual. It's an IT-based system. We're bound to have challenges with IT-based systems. Every IT-based system everywhere in the world has challenges. But generally, it's a very simple portal to engage with, and we have help desks and support staff who help us cut through any issues that may arise. Remember, this is public funds that we're dispersing. We're very careful. We're not in a hurry to disperse funds to the wrong people. So some of the glitches you see may be deliberate because we're checking and trying to make sure that we're not hacked or defrauded.
Right. You said you're not looking to disperse funds to the wrong people. What do you consider wrong people? And how does this guarantor process work? Who is guaranteeing these loans? I think I missed that part of.
Okay, so there is no guarantor process. There is no godfather. There is no imam, no pastor, no judge, no civil servant. The only connection you need to get this loan is an internet connection. And we recognize that not even everybody has that. So we're going to put things in place to ensure that people can be connected. But there is absolutely no guarantor. To your first question, which I think is, who are the right students or who are the wrong students? In that specific comment that I made, we recognize that, you know, anywhere where you have a system like this, you can have people attacking the site. You can have people wanting to insert ghost students. You can have identity hijacking, if you like. We're very careful. We try to ensure by putting in proper processes that we don't pay out to people who very cleverly sneaked into our database or into our system. It can happen. It will happen. But we're here to stop it from happening or to reduce it wherever it does.
To stop ghost students from getting the loans, right?
Absolutely. Well, ghost students won't get the loans. Other people will get the loans as ghosts, if you like. But you know, we recognize that this is about money. And you know, wherever you have money, people will try to be smart, they'll try to be clever. It happens all over the world. Our job is to prevent those leakages from happening.
All right, can you quickly clarify for me again how many students have benefited from these 11 billion that have been disbursed? How many did you indicate?
Okay. So to be precise, 90,970 students have benefited very directly through their fees being paid and them receiving upkeep from their own bank accounts.
All right, so there's still about 80 billion plus, is that correct, waiting to be accessed, isn't it?
Yes, just under. Yes.
That's right. Would that be for a session or for, when you say that you are committed to 92 billion plus, to be disbursed within what given time? Would that be in a year or forever?
Okay, so let me just give you some background numbers. We've had 373,000 people approach our portal and provide us with information, which indicates that they might be willing to apply for the loan. Of that 373,000, we've had 284,000 who've actually applied, and they've applied for the next session. So when I say we've committed to 92 billion, of which we've paid about 11, just under 11 billion, what I'm telling you is that that 92 billion is committed for the next session. So the next academic session is what that 92 billion represents. We're receiving applications every day, so that number goes up daily.
But if you have had more people apply, you will have taken out of the remaining money for the outgone session that you have paid for. Is that correct?
So, you know, the timetabling of institutions, you know, in terms of when the academic session starts is very different across the country. So you're not looking at any sort of uniformity here. Yeah. What I'm saying is that effectively the funds that we've committed to are for the next session, depending on which institution it is. We're processing those applications, the 92 billion, and we will disperse that over, I believe, the coming weeks and months, not years.
That's clear, but where I was actually going was to address the, in addition to what Oji said about rural areas not having enough information and therefore not applying. I'm not concerned about the rural areas because you've addressed it. I'm concerned about a section of the country which reports say didn't apply. And I'm talking in terms of the southeastern institution, southeast of Nigeria.
Right.
Because if they had applied, I would like you to confirm if that is true, by the way. But then if it is true that they didn't apply, will it be out of misinformation or outright boycott? Because I would imagine that if they had applied for the loan, you would certainly have disbursed more than 11 billion for the first session.
Okay, so it's not correct to say that a certain part of the country hasn't applied. Every single part of this country has received applications. So let me just state that as a fact. And I will talk about the discrepancies in the numbers. I think what we have noticed is that the institutions in the northern part of the country have been very, very quick to galvanize the applications. And so we've seen the highest numbers coming out of the north of the country. The south of the country has been more lackadaisical in terms of their applications and their enthusiasm for this. That may be cultural, but I'll draw your attention to something. When we looked at the numbers a bit more closely, we noticed that a good number of people from the south of the country attend institutions in the north of the country, and they've applied. So there's a sort of geographical disparity, but there isn't necessarily a state of origin disparity to the same degree. People go to universities, polytechnics, colleges of education from every part of the country to every part of the country. So, but you're right. There seems to be a lesser level of enthusiasm in the southeast, in the south-south, and in the southwest. Our sensitization program appears to be addressing this. I think people are buying in. I don't think there's a boycott. I just think there are different attitudes culturally to taking loans, and there are different levels of confidence and different levels of understanding of what this actually means. And as we go out and educate, we'll see those numbers change. I'm certain of that.
Oh, you said there's different attitudes when it comes to confidence, but I want to also ask if you faced attitudes when it comes to trust, particularly because this is trusting a government program, trusting that you wouldn't have debtors calling you or banging on your door if you take this loan, trusting that, I want to commend NELFUND because the first law was not as good as the second law that we had, the law that required guarantors, the law that had income, caps. And so it seems that you guys are taking feedback. So I want to commend NELFUND for taking feedback, and the legislative body, because the bill did come from the House, it even came before President Tinubu. But, moving forward, one of the conversations that has been going on, particularly with young people, is the fact that it's only available to public institutions. And if these monies are being paid to the universities in terms of tuition fees, in terms of upkeep to the students, if it's being paid back from employers, some argue that by removing private institutions from it, it's also harming a certain segment of society who wants to have access to these private institutions that are in some ways sometimes more have better academic standing, some of the private institutions, or even just shorter terms, terms in order to graduate. And so I want to ask, is it possible that this is going to be open to students who want to attend private universities in Nigeria? I'm not saying abroad, but in Nigeria, because it shouldn't be limited to just the wealthy who can attend a private institution.
Sure. So first of all, you commended NELFUND for receiving feedback and for reacting, and I thank you for that commendation. I'm going to pass it straight on to the President, who took the feedback, represented the bill to the House, and to the legislators who very wisely, within a 24-hour period, returned an act that's workable, which makes my life a whole lot easier. So to the question around private institutions, I think, we need to be very clear. This loan is designed to help those who are finding it most difficult to get the sort of education they need to get. There is a tendency, or we're more likely to find those people in public institutions where fees are low and they're easier to access for families who just can't afford the private institutions. We're dealing with public funds. The funds are limited. The fees that we would need to disperse to private institutions in general would be higher, so we would be able to provide less opportunity for the generality or the majority of Nigerians. This is a start. I know that when I spoke with His Excellency, President Tinubu, he expressed his desire that this loan should be accessible for everybody, to every Nigerian, whether they're in a public institution or in a private institution. But you know, with these sorts of things where you have to stage and you have to manage funds, you have to start somewhere. I have no doubt that at some point in the future, it will be expanded. I'm not a legislator. I can't, you know, put my hand on my heart and say that would happen, but I would argue for that at some point in the future. But we're hunting, we're looking for people who need this. There are lots of people in this country who've been left behind. I'm also going to speak to something that you mentioned at the beginning of your questioning. You talked about trust and trust deficit. You know, there's over 6 decades here of governments, various governments letting people down, making promises and either not fulfilling them or implementing them improperly or poorly. There's bound to be some sort of trust deficit. We want to restore that. We want to be, at NELFUND, one of the organizations that tries to restore this trust. We're working with us. I know there are many other agencies who are also trying to do the same. Trust is a big, big, big thing. And we want to be part of rebuilding that trust because we must help Nigerians, or we must help them apply and access for things that are going to change their lives. And we don't want that to be blocked because they have no trust, where actually the government means well.
All right. Well, speaking of trust, I wanted to go back on your statement there where you talked about geographical disparity as to you know, how these loans have been disbursed. I'd like to know how you came about those figures in terms of whether or not the people from the South were the people applying for the loans. I'd love some sort of transparency here because Steve's concern is quite valid, the concern about boycott of certain zones. Can you share with us how, you know, how you guys found out whether or not people from the South were able to apply for loans in the North, and that sort of data? I'd love for you to share with us.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
We receive applications from individuals. They provide us with certain information about what they're studying, which institution they're going, what course level they're at, where they're from in terms of their state of origin. We also connect into JAMB, by the way, and there's quite a lot of data that sits in the background, as well as NIN. When we process these applications, one of the things that we absolutely have to do is to say, look, Ngozi made an application. Mm-hmm. Which institution is she going? We know that she's going to the University of Maiduguri because we have to disperse funds to them. When we run our analysis, we see which regions of the country people who are applying come from. We see which institutions they're going to because we have to disperse to those institutions. That's our primary source of determining, you know, a north, south, east, west disparity. We look at the institutions to see where we're going to be paying funds to, how many institutions in the north, how many in the south-south, how many in the southeast, how many in the southwest. And that's how we determine where the funds are going. And then, as you say, we can then tease further, or as I said, we can tease it further, tease into the data further to see where those people are from. Currently, the institutions that seem to be in the lead are, in general, from the north of the country. But the south is catching up very fast. Like I said, we've been sensitizing. But to your point, because you used the word twice now, boycott. There is no boycott of this program. There might be some trust issues, but we're addressing that. We're actually paying funds out to institutions across the country. People can see that the funds are coming. Students are receiving funds in their account. So the trust issue will disappear, but there is absolutely no boycott.
Mm. All right. We know that it is 20,000, the component that goes into pocket money, as you said, is 20,000 across board monthly. on the average, what have you noticed in terms of how much each student gets for tuition, for every other thing that goes directly to the institutions? On the average, how much will that be? Will it be 50? Will it be 100? Will it be 150 or 200?
That's a good question. The fee range goes from about 46,000 to about 150,000, depending on the course. I haven't run a specific analysis on the average fees, but these are the sorts of amounts of money that are stopping people from progressing from secondary to tertiary education. Isn't a lot of money. In the private institutions, which we spoke to earlier, it probably will run into millions. And you can now see why perhaps we're focused on trying to help as many as possible rather than a few people, if you like. But yeah, I mean, that's the average, I would say, somewhere between 40 and 100
150
and 150. But of course, there'll be some outliers. There's some institutions that I've seen with very high fees, government-owned institutions. But we have to manage funds. This is a fund, and we want to make sure that as many people have access to it as possible. I don't know if I answered your question. Did I miss something out?
You did, but there's a follow-up to it because I was actually going somewhere with it. It has to do with two concerns regarding the scheme, which is essentially a loan. So if on the average, you're dishing out, let's say, between 100 and 120, 150, including the pocket money to a student that applied, people are saying that why is this important, more important now to this government rather than expand the bursary scheme for the federal government, which has now increased to about 150,000 naira per student. And that's one concern. And the other concern will be that when you say that, this is a bold move by the government, but then in the past, we have had the military also, they've also had a kind of student loan scheme in Nigeria. I would believe that should be around the time of Agawan, Murtala Muhammad and co. In addition to bursaries. So you have 92 billion waiting. People are like, why can't the government take half of that and add it to what will be free to students in terms of bursaries, given the fact that at 92 plus billion that you have, that students will have to repay back, is still less than what this same government dashed out to pilgrims at 96 billion, just to go and see the Holy Land, which they won't have to repay back. So people are like, why do I have to pay this back when Nigeria needs to educate me anyway? But then, here we are, you said that after 2 years of working, 10% of what you earn returns to the government.
Sure. I think these are valid questions. I think these are questions in any democracy that we need to be asking. However, I'm not in charge of overall government policy. What I can tell you is that this administration has put in a number of different lines of support in the education space. NELFUND on the student loan scheme is just one of them. The truth about it is that, people who go and borrow funds to carry out any sort of activity are likely to be more circumspect about what they do with those funds because they have to pay it back. If I give you money to go and buy a car, for example, or you get lent money to go and buy a car, your approach to that purchase, to the search, to your due diligence may be very different. We want people to think about the courses that they're going to take. We want them to think about the fact that there's a need for that loan to be repaid at some point. And people will be more focused if they are able to do that. If you were going to go to a university across the world and I gave you a grant to pick or a loan to pick a university anywhere in the world, you would probably want to pick the one that can put you in the best position to be able to pay back.
I'll pick the scholarship. I'll pick a scholarship.
You pick the scholarship, okay.
Not a loan.
So I hear you, and again, it's a very personal choice. And you find that in societies, amongst people, not everybody wants things free. Some people want things free. Other people actually get motivated by having to work for it. So in your own case, you know, a free scholarship, great, fantastic. Other people say, well, actually, I want a little bit more. Or I want both. I'll have a scholarship and I'll take a loan so that I can enhance my chances. I think it's important that we put both on the table. And I think that's what the president is trying to do with the policies that he's putting across the board in education. Yeah. The Minister of Education is also doing a lot of very, very good work in the education space. We're a small component of that. I know the numbers sound really big, but actually when you look at the matrix of the educational solution, let's take our eyes off the numbers for a second and look at, you know, how all the components fit together to deliver something that will make Nigeria more competitive, perhaps make the people happier, maybe make the people more happy. You know, all those sorts of things are important.
You're correct, but you know, a scholarship is also earned, by the way. It is not... it's not all that free.
By the smartest people in society. Yeah. We are targeting people who need to get an education. We're not looking for geeks. We're not looking for people who, you know, are going to go and invent the next sort of smart thing in AI. We're looking to get all our people up, not a handful of people who happen to be born with a few extra brain cells.
Well, all right.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Akintunde.
Thank you
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Please have me back.
Definitely. We definitely will.